Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Trent. This is Rams Talk. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Rams Talk. This is hopefully coming out to you on a Wednesday. The bye weeks have been a great thing. I've been able to kind of decompress a little bit, get my second win for the second half of the season, but also I've had the time to get in touch with two very influential Rams personalities. Jake Ellenbogen of Downtown Rams I don't even know when that was it last week? And then today, Sosa Kremenjas of the Locked On Rams podcast and Pro Football Focus fantasy writer. I've been following both of these guys ever since I kind of got into the Rams Twitter sphere, and when I reached out to them, they were nothing but gracious in terms of giving up some of their time to talk Rams with me. And so I hope everyone here enjoys it. I'm not going to get into any other Rams stuff right now because I'm going to have a Rams Seahawks preview dropping tomorrow, Thursday. I'm also going to do a live stream with Norb he's a Seattle guy, on his channel, and I'll give you more information on that. And that'll be, I believe, on 2 p.m. Pacific time on Friday. And then Saturday, going to do a round table with Niners guy, Cardinals guy, and Norb Seattle guy from Fan to Fan. We're going to do a live stream on the Fan to Fan YouTube channel, and I'll give you information on that. And then also a live stream on my channel, pregame live stream for the Sunday game. So this episode now with Sosa, Rams Talk, just straight Rams Talk game preview tomorrow. Live stream Seattle Rams crossover on Seattle's YouTube channel, not Seattle's, but Norb's YouTube channel. NFC West Roundtable live stream on the Fan to Fan channel on Saturday, and then on Sunday live stream Rams Talk. That's a lot. Don't worry about it. You'll get the notifications. So without any further ado, everyone please give a warm Rams Talk round of applause for my most excellent guest, Sosa Kremenjas. Alrighty, here we go. What's up, everyone? Very, very happy to say I have a special guest here, Sosa Kremenjas from, everywhere. Kind of a Rams royalty here. Sosa, thanks for being on the show. How you doing?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on. Like you mentioned, I got a lot going on these days, so it's keeping me busy, but, things are good. I'm glad we're, getting throughout this season right now. I was worried about, obviously, the whole COVID thing and whether we were going to be able to get a whole season. But so far, it's been good. Everything's been good. Nothing to really complain about so far.
Right on. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I mean, I kind of have my doubts with the COVID thing, but I think football, having, the NBA and Major League Baseball as like test subjects to see, I think they've handled it great. And I think that's actually one of the best things about the Rams so far, knocking on wood somewhere, that we haven't been hit by the COVID bug yet. So, so real quickly, could you just give I know a lot of my subscribers also follow you with the Locked On podcast, but where are you, like physically? Where are you digitally? And how did you become a Rams fan?
Yeah, so I am located in Canada, in to be specific, in Ontario. That's the province, and the city is called Hamilton, and that's roughly about 45 minutes away from Toronto. So it's a relatively large city. In terms of digitally, I'm on Twitter. I'm always active on Twitter. You can find me there at QB's MVP. I write for Pro Football Focus. Now I'm a fantasy analyst there, so I cover the league as a whole. I write, 4 articles a week there, ranging from start sits to, waiver wire pickups, all that good stuff, everything fantasy related. And then, like you mentioned, I'm also on the Locked On Rams podcast, and everything there is centric and revolving around the Rams, which is great because, like you mentioned, I'm a Rams fan, so it comes naturally for me, and it's obviously very fun to cover the Rams still, because for the last 3 years, and, this is my first season without it, I covered the Rams for SB Nation for Turf Show Time. So getting to cover your favorite team is always a blessing, and I'm lucky that I got to do it again this season. So far, it's been good. It's been challenging. It's been different. This is my first time podcasting, but it's fun. Now, as how I became a Rams fan, well, I was born in Germany and I lived there for 6 years. Then my family and I moved to Canada in the year 2000. So right when the Rams were obviously in their peak, right, in the greatest show on turf days. And so, funnily enough, my dad had bought me and my brother one of these, the original Xbox, the big one. And we borrowed a video game. I can't recall what football game it was from a buddy of his. And for whatever reason, it was like, it must have been some sort of a demo or something, because you could only use two teams, and it was the Titans and the Rams. And so my brother was older than me, and he was obviously better at video games than me. I think that's typically how it goes with brothers. So I got the better team, which was the Rams. And it really just started like that, to be honest. I mean, we started playing that game, and that was like my first exposure to football. And man, the first time I seen Isaac Bruce, I just fell in love with the game of football. And for, the last 20 years, it's become just increasingly more obsessive. And, the more I got to watch it, the more it started to become commonplace in Canada. When I was a kid, maybe 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have football, like the access like we have now. We have Game Pass and all this other stuff where you can watch as much football as you want. So that's really how it began. And, over the years, I got to see so many great players. And just like most people, probably my age, in that 25, 26-year-old range, it started with the greatest show on turf, watching guys like Marshall Faulk, Torrey Holt, Orlando Pace, Kurt Warner, Isaac Bruce, and then that next generation of guys like Steven Jackson. And so here we are, that's how it began. And it's just become pretty much a lifelong obsession up to this point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like a lot of people around the United States especially became Rams fans, even if they weren't in St. Louis or in LA. They became Rams fans around the greatest show on turf. I mean, because it was such an amazing team, and it came out of nowhere. I remember going to a sports bar that first week of that season, and they're playing the Ravens, and I didn't know what was about to happen. And so it all unfolded, and it's almost like a dream that we had. And talk about a team to play with in Madden, the greatest show on turf Rams, like that's pretty awesome. Now it's funny that you mentioned that you're born in Germany. That's where I am right now. So so it's cool to how we connect on that. And then the last part is turf show times, man. Like I remember the turf show times days, and I know it's still there, but we don't need to get into that. Yeah. So I'm curious though, when you watch the game live, how do you watch it? Because, as I'm watching more football and I'm looking into things and I'm really picking up, just all the terminology and the schemes and all this and stuff, I'm finding that I'm watching the games different than how I used to. Even in a live setting, because it used to be always just follow the ball. But, now like, where's Jalen Ramsey here? Where, who's in motion? How many tight ends do we have on the field? So how do you watch a game now live? And then how do you go back and consume it? Because I'm pretty sure you watched the all 22. So kind of take me through your process with that.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I cover the league now as a whole. So as a fantasy analyst, so the way I cover it now is probably different than I would have, 12 months ago. So these days I'm trying to consume really every game. I watch basically every game every week. And I try nowadays to try to note little things that are relatively important to when it comes to fantasy football. Things like, are guys getting injured? First of all, I'm taking notes during the games. Are guys getting injured? What's their usage like? Is there a guy that's just not getting the ball? Is there a guy who's getting a lot of touches for some reason? I'm focusing on things like, are they getting high value touches? Is there a running back who is getting a lot of receiving work, or is a offensive skill position getting a lot of work in the red zone or near the goal line? Things like that. But when it comes to the Rams, just in general, it really depends. It depends. Every game is probably a different thing. I'm usually trying to focus on certain matchups that I think are very interesting. So, I might follow Aaron Donald for the majority of a contest, looking at, how many times is he going against a certain offensive lineman, or is he getting doubled or triple teamed? A lot of things like that. Then, I'm watching the offensive line pretty often. I'm trying to get a good look of, what kind of pockets are these quarterbacks working with? What kind of pocket is, Jared Goff being given? And just things like that, so I don't think it's anything too crazy in terms of how I watch live games. I would say mostly I watch it as a fan, but I do also watch it from that fantasy angle where I try to take as many notes as I can. But when it comes to the all 22, yeah, like you mentioned, I do try to watch it every week because it just tells a whole different story. It's like if a guy's not getting targeted, why is he not getting targeted? And then, you can see certain things like, for example, you look at that Miami Dolphins game and the Rams looked horrible. It looks like, nothing is working. Nobody's open. These play calls are terrible. But then when you go back and look at the tape, you start to realize like, wow, there's some open receivers here. This play did work. You just didn't have the time, or this play was just terrible from the beginning. So it starts to begin to tell a different story. And I think, whether or not you even know what you're looking at, or anything about football, I think you can pretty easily tell if someone's wide open, or things like that. And so I started watching all 22 maybe roughly 10 years ago, I would say. That was probably the first exposure I ever had to it. As far as I knew, that was the first time really that was widely available in Canada. And really, that's just how my knowledge of the game grew. I started consuming a lot of online content from a lot of really smart people, much smarter people than I. And I'd go back and watch and just try to watch things and pick up certain things, pick up certain formations. Why is this guy moving this way? Why is this pre-snap motion happening? Why do I keep seeing this sort of run play come up? Why do these things look similar? And so typically, on Sundays, I'm trying to watch the game as a fan, but I got a job to do. So I do try to consume that from a fantasy angle as well. But, if the Rams are playing on, say, a Sunday night, I'm kicked back, laid back, just like everyone else, trying to enjoy the game as much as possible. But, if you follow me on Twitter, you probably know that I like to have some fun on Twitter as well, and tweet some humorous things, some silly things while games are going on. So I try to keep it light.
Yeah, and I think I definitely, especially against Miami, I noticed you on Twitter in real time, and I'm on there too, and everyone, and all the usual suspects, and there was a stressful time to say the least. This bye week was kind of great for me. It just it was nice to just sit back on a Sunday and consume football and really just not have your blood pressure up. Even when the Rams are not getting, their butts kicked, it's still, I'm pacing, and it's kind of really turned me into a nervous wreck. And now you touched on something that you mentioned there, kind of about going back and watching, especially the all 22, or watching the Miami game again. And there were some open receivers or running backs, or just people that were open. And I did the same thing, and I noticed that in the game, I felt like I was a little harsher on Sean McVay than I was Jared Goff. And then going back and rewatching again, I kind of felt like that shifted and flipped, because I felt like some of the plays were there to mitigate the zero pressure. But Goff just was not seeing it, was not registering it. Did you go from like the McVay to Goff, or were you always a little 50-50 on that?
Yeah, no, I was very similar to what you had. So, I think there's definitely blame to be placed on Sean McVay, not necessarily in terms of, not calling the correct plays. I think, like you said, the plays were there to be made, but he has to, I think, just do a better job of understanding his personnel, right? Like, you've been with a guy like Jared Goff for almost 4 years now, almost 4 entire years. So you got to know that at some point, this is just not a guy who's very good against the blitz. We've seen it time and time again. We go back to that Super Bowl, and then we've seen it from every Belichick disciple that we faced for the past 4 years. We've seen it with Matt Patricia and the Lions. We've seen it with Joe Judge and the Giants, who the Rams should have blown out, the water. But that was a game right till the end where Daniel Jones throws that pick to Darius Williams. And then again, we see with Brian Flores here with the Dolphins. And so, I think Sean McVay just needs to do a better job of understanding what Goff's limitations are as a player. And so that's where my blame is essentially focused on when I look at the coaching staff. Also, the fact that, the Dolphins are terrible against the run. I'm still dumbfounded as to how you're not, taking what's there. I understand it's easy, and maybe you want to attack them differently, or, knock them on their heels kind of thing. But the numbers tell a different story. They tell you that the Dolphins are terrible against the run and that they're very good against the pass. And so I'm very confused as to how that game plan came about. But with that being said, like you said, I look at it very similar to how you did. I was confused as to what Sean McVay was doing during the live game, because you can't really tell. Everything is coming quick. And then when I went back and got a chance to actually, consume the all 22, it tells a different story. It's like, why is Jared Goff not throwing hot here? Why is he not, audibling here? Why is he not looking this way? There's two guys wide open here. What is he doing on this play? Why is he throwing this? And so, I get it. It's hard for a quarterback. that's the point of, cover zero, is to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and get him, nervous and try to get the ball out of his hands really quickly. But so I had a very similar, take as you did. It was a lot more Sean McVay during the game, and then post, tape study, it was more like, how did you miss this pass? How did you miss that pass? And there were definitely plays to be made there that they just didn't make.
Yeah, and speaking of Sean McVay, knowing his personnel and being with Goff for several years now, and kind of knowing what his limitations were, I felt like coming into this Miami game, the story for McVay and Goff was being managed. It wasn't the gunslinger from last year. I felt like he was going 10 for 10 with completions, I think, in a couple different games to start out, and I felt like he was just being in a position to just make the easy throws, to build the confidence, to not be turnover Goff. Because you go back to last year and the game, the Tampa Bay game, the Pittsburgh game, 7 turnovers combined. And I feel like, Goff had 20-something, 24, 25, I don't know, total turnovers last year. And I think that coming into this year was, okay, we don't have that burner, so we're not going to take all these deep shots, but we're going to just kind of, roll them out, hit some of these quick passes. And I felt like that kind of changed, and rely on the running game a little more. And I think in this last game, it all kind of fell apart. And I think, when you're facing pressure, it's hard to really, make sense of a lot of these things. But I felt like he turned Goff into more of the game manager. And I personally feel like if Goff is just a really consistent, not turning the ball over game manager, with this defense evolving, I feel like this is kind of like the recipe of, the Ravens teams with Trent Dilfer, or some of these other teams that didn't really have the prolific quarterback, but their defense and game management really carried them. And I felt like that's how they were trending. So I wonder if they'll continue that. And while we're talking about offense, I'm going to flip a couple of these questions here to move it up to offense. So I think coming into the season, it was no secret that this team was only going to go as far as the offensive line took them. And I know that you have been really consistent in talking about the offensive line performance throughout each week. Now, coming off of a 31st ranked offensive line last year, we all know the reasons why. How would you assess their 2020 performance? And where would you – I always thought that if you put them in the top – if they were a top 15 offensive line, then the Rams definitely had a shot this year. How do you assess their offensive line?
I looked at it very similarly. I was one of the people that was probably most concerned about the offensive line coming into the season. I thought, like you mentioned, they were ranked 31st. They looked really bad running the ball. They couldn't run the ball last season. They couldn't really pass the ball properly. I was concerned. I was definitely concerned. And, looking back now, the Rams didn't really make any additions to that offensive line, throughout the offseason. All they really added was a 7th-round pick who hasn't even played yet, which is a good thing. And so I was concerned. I was definitely a little bit worried about, whether they were going to be able to improve upon last year's performance. And like yourself, I thought that, even if they could get somehow to a league average ranking, like 16th, you don't got to be the best offensive line, just good enough that it was going to allow the Rams to win 10 or 11 games this season and potentially find their way back into the playoffs. And so, looking throughout their performance in these first 8 weeks, I'm shocked. Like, I can't believe how much better they've played now. I think there has to be some credit given to a guy like Sean McVay for, this is one of the areas where he does understand his personnel well, where he does want to protect his offensive line and Jared Goff really as a whole by, moving his launch points. He's giving him a lot of rollouts. He's moving his launch points. He's not letting him just stand back there like a deer or like an Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to, or like a Russell Wilson. He's not going to stand back there in the pocket, take 5 and 7 step drops, play after play, and throw 30-yard plus passes every play. So he understands that maybe they don't have the highest end of talent when it comes to that offensive line, but he's done a very good job mitigating what they might not have in terms of the talent or whatever. But with that being said, they're still playing very, very well. I mean, they've been great at run blocking. The Rams have been arguably the best running team in football this season. They've been really good at running the ball. And they're doing what they have to do when it comes to the pass. Now, they've allowed, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but they're definitely one of the best teams when it comes to allowing pressures. I think they're in the top 5, meaning like the least pressures allowed. And I think they're actually ranked first in pressure percentage. So, on a per snap basis, how often they're allowing pressure, which is amazing. So, it's a mix of play calling, play design, and then performance. And so, when I look at how they've done so far, I'm absolutely shocked. I think they've exceeded my expectations in every way. And they've been the key to allowing Jared Goff to have a bounce back season, to allowing guys like Darrell Henderson to, sprout out of nowhere and look like star running backs. And so long as they can continue performing like this, I think, the sky's the limit for the offense. But not only that, I think, if the Rams can find their way into the playoffs, which, looks like they probably can at this point, that, I don't think there's any limit to what they can do in the playoffs as long as this offensive line continues to perform well.
No, I totally agree. And I feel like last year was more of an anomaly. And guy from Football Outsiders even said, with every team, like with the San Francisco defense last year, with the Rams offensive line last year, there's a plexiglass principle. So basically, when you make such a leap or a regression that's so drastic from one year to the next, you're usually going to come back, down, closer to the average a little bit. So I felt like the Rams, there was, it would be very hard for them to still be like the 31st, ranked offensive line this year because, Havenstein was never that bad and he was dealing with injuries. Blythe, wasn't, he was moved into center halfway through the season, so he didn't have all those reps. He was just thrown into the fire. Corbett hadn't really had any playing time. He's on a new team. So you take all these factors into account. You have that continuity, coming into the season. And also, like you said, McVay knowing about his personnel and scheming it. So I think, the reason why a lot of the pressure rate is low is because not only because they're doing a great job with blocking, but also because they're getting the ball out of Goff's hands a little faster and moving the pocket. So, tip of the cap to McVay and to the O-line for stepping up, because I feel like that's kind of something that we've forgotten, or we've forgotten that was such a problem, because coming into the season, how many people wanted to draft an offensive lineman, and that was really what everyone just said. We're going to go as far as the offensive line takes us. So, I'm really, really happy with the performance. Andrew Whitworth is just, to me, when McVay came in 2017, we added a lot of players that year, and obviously with McVay, but that huge turnaround, I attribute that to Andrew Whitworth replacing Greg Robinson. You go from arguably the worst left tackle in my lifetime to one of the better left tackles. I mean, that change is so drastic, and it can't be understated. Now let's just flip over to the defensive side. So I think we were all pretty optimistic with Brandon Staley coming on board this year. And I did a lot of research into the Vic Fangio defense and what made that so successful. And, you hear all about this positional versatility. And now we're seeing it unfold. Walk us through what you see schematically that he is able to do. I mean, granted, we're playing the Washington football team here and, some other kind of, bottom dwellers offensively. But what are the Rams doing defensively that has elevated them to one of the top defenses in all of football?
I think, what makes them so good at what they are, and Brandon Staley's so impressive, is that they don't have an identity. That's the way I look at it. It's like, man, one week they might be playing, a lot of cover 4, quarters coverage. The next week they might be playing a lot of cover 3 or, cover 1, or, man, their ability to get multiple is really, really impressive to me. So that's the first thing, is just being very varied in their coverage. They don't really have any set coverage, I would say. Obviously, it comes from that Fangio tree, like you mentioned, and, he brings over that quarters coverage base look. But, when you look past that, he's been so impressive. I mean, even one of my colleagues, Seth Galina, wrote a piece on it. It was fantastic. Everyone should go read it. But he talked about how, he's brought this tight front when it comes to the defensive line, putting 5 guys on the line of scrimmage to help stop the run. And the Rams have been one of the best run-stuffing units in the league, and they didn't even have Bijan Robinson, the guy who they paid primarily to stuff the run for the first, 10 weeks. So his ability to scheme guys into advantageous positions, his ability to get multiple in terms of coverage. He's playing a lot of zone coverage. Obviously, that's really where the league is trending. It's not a lot of man coverage left over. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I don't think that there is any team in the NFL right now that's playing more man coverage than zone. But yeah, he's being very varied on the back end. He's got a lot of versatility, which I think has allowed him to do that. He's got 3 safeties that are maybe even 4 safeties, I guess, before Terrell Burgess's injury, that allow him to do whatever. These guys can rotate. They can all play near the line of scrimmage. They can all play, on the back end in 2 safety looks or in single high looks. You have a trio of corners that can really play anywhere. We've seen Troy Hill in the nickel. We've seen Troy Hill on the outside. We've seen Jalen Ramsey on the outside. We've seen him in that star position, which is the nickel position. We've seen him blitzing him. We've seen a lot of, interesting blitzes, 5-man pressures. And I think he's done a really good job, tying into that blitz talk right there, is that he's done a very good job trying to get Aaron Donald as many one-on-ones as possible by, bringing as many guys as he can in the blitz and putting as many guys as he can on that line of scrimmage by, occupying offensive linemen, essentially calling it a hat on a hat, right? One defender for one offensive players. And so anytime you can get a guy like Aaron Donald, a one-on-one, I mean, more often than not, and way more often than not, he's probably going to win that battle. And so, it's no secret why Aaron Donald is now going to be way more productive than he was last season. He almost has as many sacks, in the first 8-9 weeks. So he's been very impressive, man. I was concerned, not necessarily concerned. I was intrigued to see how Staley was going to replace a legend in Wade Phillips. And, he's blown it out of the water. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be back next year. He might be a head coach next year. That's how impressive he's been. So that defense is playing amazing football right now, and 100% starts and I want to say ends with that defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and then, one of the words that you touched on is something that I don't think we spoke or we even uttered last year, is the word multiple. Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, we can even kind of refer to that on the offensive side too, because, the depth at each position on offense. I mean, you have so many tight ends and receivers and running backs that you can kind of do what, be multiple in that way with your formations and how you're spreading the ball around. But on defense, just when you're saying multiple, I'm just thinking of Eric Weddle and Clay Matthews. And I'm thinking of just kind of the traditional defensive mindset that Wade Phillips had, and with a lot of zone there, especially when Marcus Peters was around. And so, that's the exciting thing is, like you said, every week it's almost a different strat scheme in a way, and it can even vary, within the snap, so that's, I think, really exciting. And also another thing you touched on was Ashawn, and I just want to get your thoughts now. It just dawned on me that with Ashawn and Fuller back, minus Terrell Burgess, and with Obo maybe a week, 2 weeks away, I mean, the defense is almost full strength, which is pretty crazy. Coming into week 9, being full strength on defense, I'm really excited to see how this unfolds going into Seattle. And speaking of Seattle, so we all know, run the ball. Run the ball. Just keep running. Since the Super Bowl, run the ball, right? But we're coming up against the worst secondary in football. So how do you approach this game? Because, of course, obviously you want to run the ball. It sets up your play action. It sets up throwing the ball. But when you're facing a secondary it's the worst secondary so far in the season, how do you approach this? What is this? Do you think there's an internal struggle, or do you think this is easy from McVay in terms of planning the offensive attack?
It's going to be interesting to see. I'm curious to see as well. Is he going to go with what logic dictates, which, we thought was running the ball against Miami, but it turned out, he didn't want to do that. So, I'm intrigued to see, is he going to try to overcorrect coming into this week and now try to run the ball very heavily and not put Goff in these bad situations? Or is he going to play the matchup and do what the numbers tell him? And what the numbers tell him right now is that Seattle is one of the worst secondaries in NFL history. I mean, they are on a historic pace right now for allowing the most receiving yards. I believe through the first 9 weeks, they've allowed the most, and it's been like a significant margin too. And then you look at, they don't even have Shaquille Griffin, their best corner. They're banged up at that corner position right now. To me, I mean, the logic would tell you to throw the ball a lot, and test these cornerbacks, move that pocket for Jared Goff, try to keep him as clean as possible, do more of what we've seen, through the first 8 weeks. But man, I would not be holding Jared Goff back in this one. I think this is the perfect chance actually for the Rams to get back on track offensively. start to build that momentum that they lost coming into the bye week with that Miami game, and set the tone really right now for the second half of the season, and get Jared Goff back into that groove where he can just start to rip the ball, because when Jared Goff's comfortable and, he's being given clean pockets and he's allowed to step into his throws, man, he can look dangerous. He can look borderline elite, and he could be one of the best and most accurate quarterbacks in football. And that's the kind of Jared Goff I want to see this week, and that's the kind of Jared Goff I think we can see this week, so long as Sean McVay doesn't really, shackle him up, so to speak, by, being scared of what he's seen in that Miami game. So coming into this one, I would suggest to throw the ball, a lot. They're terrible on that back end, the Seattle secondary. They've allowed the most yards to slot receivers, over 300 yards from, Seattle, which is 32nd ranked, to the 31st ranked team, which is the Cleveland Browns, which should tell you how bad they are. Cooper Kupp's coming off a game in which he was targeted 20 times. I mean, if there's a time where you want to target Cooper Kupp 20 times, this might be the week. So, man, I would suggest to throw the ball early and often, but I'm curious to see really what McVay is going to have in store for this game. I really don't know.
Yeah, and I saw your tweet earlier with the Cooper Kupp and the trending up chart emoji, so I definitely wanted to have you address that. Now, yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, I feel like you're coming off a terrible game, but you have that bye week. And Jared Goff, if anything, seems so even-keeled, right? So, I mean, I know that affected him, but I don't think he gets too high or too low about anything. I think he can really step back and take a look at it. I think they're going to have a really good game plan coming in, especially with the depleted secondary. I mean, Jamal Adams is not good in coverage. So I just feel like Seattle will be coming at them with a lot of pressure. So I think, it'll be incumbent on McVay and Goff to, fix those mistakes and apply them to this week, because, Adams will be blitzing, and they even brought a lot of pressure against Buffalo too. So I feel like, I'm with you on that. I think Goff will have a good game, but, the pressure has me a little concerned. Now flipping it over to the other side of the ball, this is the first year I feel like, Metcalf was a rookie last year. And you saw the flashes, but now he's really established himself. Lockett has always given us fits, especially when Marcus Peters was on the team. I don't know how many times Marcus Peters was like 20 yards, behind him on a touchdown. How do you see, our pressure mitigating Russ? If Chris Carson's back, do you feel Chris Carson will be back in this game? And then how do you like that secondary matchup versus their receivers?
Yeah, so it sounds right now like, Chris Carson might have a chance to come back in this one. Running back 2, Carlos Hyde, sounds like he might have a chance to come back in this one. So I would expect that, Carson and Hyde will be back in this one. So that means less touches, less carries, less usage for rookie DJ Dallas. But, I wouldn't be too overly concerned about that running game. They are good. Chris Carson's a very talented running back. He's tough as hell. Man, he can break tackles like the best of them. So, that's going to be a concern. But, I feel like the Rams have just been so good against the run this season that when you got Russell Wilson back there, you got to be all guns blazing for that guy. That's going to be your number one key to trying to stop the Seahawks. They've been one of the most explosive passing offenses in football this season, which is weird and different because, they haven't been primarily a passing offense looking back to last year and the years prior. They've been ground and pound, run that play action, move Russell Wilson out of the pocket, and take the occasional deep strike here or there. But, man, this season it's been a lot of DK Metcalf sunning guys down the sideline, a lot of Tyler Lockett running wide open down the sidelines, a lot of David Moore catching, 40-plus yard touchdowns. So, man, they're loaded at that receiver position, like you said. The Rams are going to have to come, with their lunch pail, so to speak. It's going to be a war. I would probably suggest, leaving a guy like Jalen Ramsey to cover DK Metcalf pretty much the whole game. They got that good size, matchup there. I feel like, if you put somebody else on DK Metcalf, they're going to be dwarfed. I mean, the guy's 6'3", 6'4", and runs a 4.3. I mean, he's a freak. So if you can get a guy like Jalen Ramsey on him, who's, 6 feet tall, 6'1", whatever, probably matches up pretty well with him there. So I would personally do that. And then I would let, a guy like Darius Williams try to get as much of Tyler Lockett as possible. So that's definitely going to be where the game is won and lost, in my opinion. Those guys are incredibly explosive, the receivers for Seattle. But, at the same time, the Rams have been one of the best defenses in football. They've been arguably the best pass defense in football. Now, it's tough to say depending on, if you look at schedules, who they've played. Yeah, okay, Washington might not be the Kansas City Chiefs when it comes to throwing the football, but, you can only play who you play. And so thus far, the Rams have been very, very good in coverage. They got a lot of good safeties back there. They got 2 corners who are performing at potentially top 15 levels right now. Troy Hill, I feel like, has played better since they moved him to the outside. Now, I don't know what the Rams are going to do in terms of, who's going to line up where, because DK Metcalf's not lining up in the slot. So if the Rams want Ramsey to cover him, it's not going to be in the slot, which I guess would either send a guy like Darius Williams into the slot to cover Lockett or leave a guy like Troy Hill in there to cover him. But yeah, it's going to be, that island is going to be the game. I think it comes to the Rams are going to have to try and pressure Russell Wilson as much as possible, try to get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible, because the longer he holds the ball, the more dangerous he becomes. And yeah, that, they got to keep everything in front of them. If the Seahawks are going to string together a 14 or 17 play drive to score, I would be okay with that. I would take that. But you can't let them strike big and score those 40 or 50-yard touchdowns, because that's what they've done all season. So I feel like that's what the Rams are probably going to do. I feel like they've done that mostly, this season, is that they want to keep things in front. They want to force teams to string together those 10, 12, 15 play drives to score, because, at some point offenses are probably going to make a mistake, or, they get a penalty and it sets them back big time. So it's better to get scored on in 15 plays than it is to get scored on in 3. And the Seahawks have done that a lot to defenses this season. So, I'm interested to see, is Aaron Donald and that defensive line going to be able to pressure Wilson enough to maybe not let him throw some of those deep balls or overthrow them, or, make him double clutch and kind of have to break a tackle. And then, by the time he breaks the tackle and gets out of the pocket, that option is now covered. Or is it going to be, the Seahawks just letting it rip, and it's going to be a 37-34 kind of game with just scores back and forth. So, it's going to be very interesting to see. We've got a very good offense on the Seahawks side, very good defense on the Rams side. Something has to give. So I'm very intrigued to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, this is the first real test for the Rams, I feel, especially for their defense, because, the receivers that Dallas, I thought Dallas would have been that game as well. And it still was. I think that just was a testament to our defense in the game. Dak, Zeke, that trio of receivers there. And I think that, starting, the back 9 of the season for the Rams, this is the game where, if the Rams defense shows up in this game, then I don't think we'll have any more doubters. And I also think that AD always plays well against the Seahawks. I know the Seahawks pass blocking has actually been a little bit better than we thought this year. That'll be interesting, but it always comes down to the Russell Wilson magic. At the end of the day, it's always in every game, it's always the Russell Wilson magic. And luckily, two of the last 3 games, his magic was gone. With he's dancing around and throwing interceptions, but I think that also was probably because he had the running game wasn't there. So I'm really, really excited for this game. Now, I know I've heard you've had many people on your shows, and you're always talking about projection on the second half of the season. So once again, for the record, I predicted the Rams going 10-6 for the season, but with a real good chance to be 11-5. And I feel like they're in prime position to do that, with splitting the Seahawks, splitting with Arizona, beating the Jets and the Patriots, although the Patriots are a sneaky team for me, and beating the 49ers, even though we still have to prove we can beat the 49ers because they've had our number for a while. Tampa Bay is can go either way. Obviously, one game with Seattle, one game with Arizona, and Patriots kind of iffy. So I kind of have 5-3, 6-2 second half. That's what I have. What are your thoughts?
I look at it the same way. And what's funny about it is I always feel like I make these, projections and predictions every season. And then when I look back, it's like everything that I thought was going to happen, the complete opposite happened. And the Rams will lose a game or two that they shouldn't lose, like the Patriots, for example, but they'll somehow beat the Buccaneers. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what the heck? But yeah, I'm expecting the same thing. I think if they can split with every team in the division, you go 3-3. You win 1 with Seattle, you win 1 with Arizona, you win the last one against the San Fran 49ers, then, you're in a pretty good spot there. You're at what would that put you at? 8-6, I guess. Then you got those, those 8-6. Yeah, 8-6.
Yeah.
And then you got those, remaining games. You got the Jets, who I don't want to say they're necessarily a cakewalk, but that's a game you absolutely need to win, no questions asked. And it feels like it's going to be a win. And then that real big toss-up for me is that Patriots game. I think they can afford to lose that Buccaneers game and not feel bad about it. I don't think that's going to set them back. Now, that's not necessarily saying that they're going to for sure lose. I think they can absolutely win that game too. And it could ultimately be, relatively important for NFC seeding for the playoffs down the line. But with that being said, that's a game that I look more to as a luxury as opposed to a need. Whereas that Patriots game, that's probably the biggest concern for me remaining on the schedule, obviously outside of the importance of the divisional games. Like I said, they can afford to lose 3 of them. I think as long as you split in the division, you're okay. But that Patriots game is the big wild card for me, is that they don't look very good. So, I want to say they're probably going to win the game, the Rams meaning. But at the same time, I think about Bill Belichick. I think about that Super Bowl. I think about that scheme giving the Rams so much trouble, against Miami, against Detroit, against New York, the Giants. And that concerns me. That might be a game that the Rams ultimately get trapped at, so they say, a trap game, so they say. But that's a game that is the big, question mark for me left on the roster or on the schedule. So long as they can split in the division 3-3, I think they're in a good standing. But if they can rattle off any better record than 3-3 within that division, maybe sweep a team and go 4-2 or 5-1 or something, I mean, that would be amazing. Obviously, that's where the schedule is going to be won or lost, essentially, is that within that division. So, but again, with that being said, I think the NFC West is talented enough and probably will send 3 teams to the playoffs. So, those games outside of the division are going to be important too. So as long as they can take care of business against the Jets, as everyone expects them to, and then whatever happens with the Buccaneers happens. But whatever happens with the Buccaneers game, then the opposite needs to happen. Not necessarily needs to happen, but then the opposite game in the Patriots is going to be potentially more important. If they win that Buccaneers game, then they can afford to lose the Patriots one. But if they lose that Buccaneers game, then that Patriots game becomes very vital. So I'm looking at it probably at a 10-6 projection as well. But, like you said, I wouldn't be shocked at 11-5 either. Just, take care of those divisional games. Those are the most important for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And after the Tampa Bay game, the travel is cake. So, I mean, that's one thing the Rams favor. Obviously, health is on their side right now as guys are returning. And I feel even with Tampa Bay, these are meaningful games. And the Rams, if they're going to be like there's a difference between a Super Bowl team and just kind of making the playoffs team. And so I think that will be revealed, if they beat Seattle. Just imagine if they beat Seattle, Tampa Bay, and I hate getting ahead of myself, but if they beat Seattle, Tampa Bay, and San Fran, then you start to see that, okay, this team is like a real contender. Mm-hmm. If they lose to one of those teams in there, but it's a close game, it's not like the Miami game, you can still see it. You can see okay, but if the wheels come off, or if they look bad in one of those games, then you're like, well, this is still kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of team. So yeah, this is what, I feel like the last half of last year is also when they kind of started coming on a little bit too, when they went more 12 personnel and started doing that. So I feel like the defense is coming on, and if they can figure out the offense and Goff can get right, then this is, I think, an 11-5 team. Now, I have one last thing for you. This one I didn't tell you about before. Sneaking it on you. We're going to do one word association. So I'm going to say a word, and you give me one word, first thing that comes to mind. Okay, we're going to go rapid fire. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. Austin Corbett.
Project.
Samson Ebukam.
No good.
Les Snead.
Poker.
Justin Trudeau.
Interesting.
Tyler Higbee.
Beauty.
Jared Goff.
Stud.
Yeah. Drake.
Ooh.
Okay. Morgan Fox.
Morgan. Underrated.
Darius Williams.
Star.
Sean McVay.
King.
Tim Hortons.
The best.
I'll give you that. That's 2 words. I'll give you that.
Amazing. There, we'll say amazing.
Okay, no, that's good. The best is fine. Brandon Staley.
Legend.
Daryl Henderson.
Star.
And the last one, Greg the Leg Zerline.
Pain.
There it is. There it is. All right, that was fun. I had to mix in some Canada-specific words there for you. Now, what do the Rams need to do against Seattle for you to levitate?
Ooh, I mean, a win would definitely do it. But, if the Rams can find a way to limit that passing game and make Russell Wilson's life hell, so to speak, and hold him to, say, 180 or 200 yards passing, no long touchdowns, and really look like that secondary that we think they are and that we think they can be, and that's the elite secondary, arguably the best in football. That would make me feel not only good about the week, not only about the win, but about their projection, sort of like you were saying moving forward, a contender kind of thing. Is that how they win is going to be important and is going to tell a story if they win, right? Are they going to win by 2 points and kind of like skate by, or a Greg Zuerlein missed field goal last year? That wasn't a very convincing win for the Seahawks, but are they going to dominate? If they dominate, I'm going to feel very good moving forward with the rest of the season, specifically for that secondary I'm talking about. I'm not going to really look at any offense left on the schedule and, be too concerned, I guess. I would say that I know that they would have the talent and the legitimate, talent and ability to stop the best of them. So as long as the secondary or that defense can come to play and really prove who we think they are, that would definitely make me levitate.
All right, I'll be watching the game, and if that happens, I'm going to be looking out for the tweet.
It'll come.
For the levitation tweet. So, well, that's it. Sosa, thank you so much for joining me and on Rams Talk. Everyone, you can find them on Twitter at QB's MVP, Locked on Rams podcast on Spotify and Apple iTunes, and I don't know, any other podcast place, and also on Pro Football Focus. So if you don't have a subscription, get yourself a subscription to Pro Football Focus and check out his fantasy articles. Sosa, thank you so much. And anything else you want to say before we call it a wrap?
Just thanks for having me on, Trent, man. I had fun. I'm always happy to hop on, and it's time to buckle up here, man. This is where the fun starts. We got these last 8 games, and this is where the story's going to be told. Are they going to be a contender? Are they going to be a pretender? Are they going to get in the playoffs again? This is where the fun really starts. So I'm excited, man. I'm hoping for a clean finish to the season for everyone with the whole COVID thing and with the health and the injuries. And I'm excited, man. I'm just ready to see what happens starting this Sunday moving forward.
All right, everyone. You heard it from Sosa. That's a wrap. Everyone, like I always say, let's go Rams. All right.